developmental hell. It's something that happens to franchises from time to time.
Nothing could be more apropos when describing the Ninja Turtles franchise. After the disappointment in fan and critical reception, as well as the lowest take-in box office receipts with 1993's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, there had been attempts at a potential fourth live-action feature that would have seen the return of the Foot and the Shredder, but the studio had no confidence based on the takings, and so it took 14 years before the Heroes in a Half Shell would return to the big screen with the CG animated movie Tmnt.
Has this held up since 2007? Well, it's time to find out as we head back to New York City for TMNT. I think one of the key themes about this movie is family.
We have a situation where the Pillar Stone of the Ninja Turtles has been away on training in Central America for a year so that he may advance his stance as a leader, and we see the other brothers coping in his absence, with Donatello becoming a tech support technician, Michelangelo as a kids party entertainer, and Raphael being a metal-clad nighttime vigilante in I Can't Believe It's Not Batman. Donnie as IT tech support makes sense since he does machines. In most incarnations, he's been the brain and techno-wizard of the Turtles. So seeing him in this scenario where he's working as tech support to earn some extra money around the lair is something I could see him doing.
Mikey as a kid's party entertainer. Well, let's be real here. What else could he do? You wouldn't trust this turtle to deliver pizza as he'd eat them before delivering them. That gives a whole new meaning to eating up the profits.
God damn it.
And Raph as a nighttime vigilante. I like to think of this as Raph continuing in a solo role, as this is a guy who chose to keep doing crime fighting, but on his terms and by his own rules. And this is something that plays into the tension and confrontation with Leo, which, as I mentioned in the previous review, this movie loosely carries over the tension that had been present in the live-action trilogy, and it finally came to a head in the rooftop battle.
And we have the sci-fi element of Winters and his true identity, the warlord Yautl.
Now, the Turtles have dealt with the uber sci-fi element in cartoons and movies before. Just look at both animated series from '87 and 2003 and Ninja Turtles 3, to name but a few.
I don't think fans were accustomed to the idea of seeing immortal warlords in a Ninja Turtles movie.
Although, considering there has been a crossover with Batman, then at some point their minds will be blown when they come across Vandal Savage. What I find rewarding about the writing regarding Winters is that the true intentions of this character are not revealed until the end. As you go through the majority of this movie thinking he has antagonistic plans with the acquisition of the monsters that were set loose 3,000 years ago. But you get hit with a twist when it's his desire to send them back and be freed of his curse of immortality, which plays into the themes of humanity and atonement.
He appreciated his humanity being restored and correcting his ancient mistake.
The other major theme that I valued from this was the humility that Raphael learned when he almost hurt Leo in their fight, and to him losing him to the Stone Soldiers, and why Splinter had chosen Leo over him as the leader. But to be fair to Raph, he does prove himself to be a good leader in the assault on Winter's estate and freeing Leo. I did enjoy the nods to the previous movies on the shelf when Raph decides to retire the Night Watcher role by placing his helmet on the shelf next to Shredder's helmet, the TGRI capsule, and the Time Scepter. Along with Casey's
"And I thought Girl Scouts were pushy!"
was a nod to Mikey's
"And I thought insurance salesmen were pushy!"
And
2 minutes for high sticking!
Was a callback to Koteas' line from the first movie.
That's fan service done right.
To sum it all up, the arcs of the brothers and their resolve are the driving points of this movie that make for good rewatch value, whereas the other elements just come across as out of left field if you view it the first time. I got the impression that Taylor's portrayal as Leo is much more by the book when compared to previous incarnations. The Brian Tocchi version still had the disciplines of a leader, but he knew how to have more of a sense of humour, whereas Taylor's came across as more of a straight arrow, and really cared about not disappointing Splinter as he valued his approval as his son and his student. I was surprised to hear the voice that Nolan gave Raph in this, considering he did a decent impression of Rob Paulsen's Raphael in 2006's The Ultimate Avengers as Hank Pym. Nolan's take on Raph is a very gruff, rough-around-the-edges performance, not too dissimilar from how he had been portrayed in the live-action trilogy and the 2003 animated series. This, I feel, is probably the most rebellious he had been, since Nolan portrays this incarnation as a turtle with no compunction of dishing out punishment to criminals, in an outfit that I can only presume was inspired by Batman's outfit against Superman in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. Mikey's take on Mikey almost feels like a background character, since he's the turtle with the least amount of dialogue. In almost every version of the Turtles, Michelangelo is the least changed brother as the goofball with obsessions over pizza and taking things the least serious.
Pretty much most portrayals of Donnie has him as the voice of reason, and here is no different.
Mitchell has a very similar pitch and cadence in his voice as that of Barry Gordon from the 87 series, and that works well since Donnie has been known to be somewhat softer spoken compared to his brothers, with Mikey being the loudest, with no explanation needed. Honestly, I think any performance that Geller walks into, she is able to distinguish herself from her other performances such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer and I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scooby-Doo. But at the same time, she's able to bring her charming voice to where it's still her, but she's able to make this take of April her own. And that's difficult to do considering the legacy that Renee Jacobs, Judith Hoag, and Paige Turco had left on the fandom. Elias Koteas is a tough act to follow as Casey Jones, and I think this is what Chris Evans does right in this role. He doesn't try to replicate what Elias did, and instead just plays it his way with a natural and likeable charm that only Evans can do. The same charm that gave a decent performance as Johnny Storm, and one probably even more so as the virtuous Steve Rogers in 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger. What is there to say? Whether it's Professor X in X-Men or being Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise, Patrick just shines in any role. This is not a role you would automatically think that he would take, considering the very credible work he did as a Shakespearean-trained actor, with stage productions from Hamlet, King Lear, and A Midsummer Night's Dream, to name but a few. But he has admitted in interviews that he is a goofball and does not remotely take himself seriously, especially when he's seen on social media in recent years promoting his all-time favourite cowboy songs while performing to a green screen.
So, in that respect, despite those contrasting aspects, he gives a great performance as Winters.
This is a character whose layers get peeled away as the movie progresses, where he is not what you think he is until the last act of the movie. This is a character who has come to realise the mistake he made eons ago in opening the portal that would grant him immortality, but at the same time bringing a plague of monsters into the world. This is Atonement, and Patrick gives a performance where he plays a character looking for said atonement and adding that touch of class in his voice, as only he can do.
Make it so.
This is bittersweet. What would be Mako's final performances where he passed away during the making of the movie, of which the latter of Splinter's lines would have to be mimicked by Greg Baldwin, of which he was not credited for. And considering how good the mimic was, you don't really notice a difference. I think the animation has a very stylized look in which the look of the characters being somewhat caricature suits the quirkiness of the characters, in that you can have the suspension of disbelief with these fantasy elements of monsters and immortal stone warriors. If the writing had been crafted in a similar realistic tone of the earlier movies, then yeah, the animation for this would have been seen as jarring, in that the style would not fit the tone of what it was looking to do. Now, I am not for a moment saying that this flick is campy and light-hearted. Nothing could be further from the truth, because the tone is considerably darker and more mature than the live-action trilogy, in which it deals with the themes of family being separated and then reuniting to tension in the ranks of the team. In that same context, I doubt you could tell the story of the tension between Raph and Leo in the style of the animated series. Maybe in the 2003 series, but even then, that tension would be tamed to the moment where Raph almost kills his brother, and then being overcome with guilt, realizing what his anger could have done. When you have the lesson that your own anger can be your worst enemy, is not something you could tell in a kid's show by sugarcoating it.
At least I don't think so.
In that context, this is probably the darkest the franchise had been by that point. So, the animation at first glance doesn't seem like something you would associate with a more mature Ninja Turtle movie setting, but when you watch the characters and see the story unfold, the animation complements it. And it has to be said, this is some of the best animation with regards to lighting, contrast, shading, particularly with buildings, streetlights, forest foliage, and just the way Leo's eyes stand out in the dark. Klaus Badelt composed the score for this picture, and I find that the music does a satisfying job of complementing the movie's tone.
We're all familiar with the scores that John Dupre composed for the live-action trilogy, and it's something we all look back on with fond regard.
The score for this movie is a different animal. Whereas the original was reflecting the type of scores from the late 80s, early 90s that had upbeat mix of rock and roll and electronic beats, this has a much darker and raw feel. Especially when you listen to the pieces where the Stone Warriors are capturing monsters around the city, and to the astounding score that is used when Raphael faces Leonardo in a showdown on the rooftops, to where the music adds to the tension between the dueling brothers. Probably my fave piece is when you see the story focus on what Raph has been doing in Leo's absence as the nighttime vigilante Night Watcher, and going around the city as this Batman-styled crime fighter, and the score just adds to the humour of this scene in which he chases down criminals. The movie grossed a profit of $95 million against a budget of $34 million. Adjusted for inflation, and the movie would be worth $121 million. It received mixed reception from the likes of USA Today and IGN. USA Today cited it as boring, whereas IGN praised it for its visuals and sound design. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that the movie had a very noirish sheen to it, where it's so no scary that the kids don't have to hide away, but at the same time would please longtime fans and bring in a new audience as well. There were hints of a possible sequel at the end, to where Karai said that they would have further dealings in the future, including familiar faces from your past, of which Raphael presumed they meant the Shredder. There were 2 sequels planned by director Kevin Monroe that would have seen an adaptation of the comic book saga, City of War, and the third movie would have seen another time travel story and the introduction of the Technodrome. Monroe never got the chance to follow up on his plans to make the sequels, as he got into work for Gotcha Man, and Mirage announced on the 25th anniversary that there would be a new live-action movie for 2011, before Viacom acquired the rights, of which led to the Michael Bay-produced live-action animation hybrid series in 2014's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. TMNT remained one of those unique and interesting takes on the franchise of what could have been had the sequels been allowed to take shape.
TMNT has been enjoyed on DVD, HD DVD, and Blu-ray since 2007. I'm MJ Knight, and we went back to the sewers for TMNT. Has this held up since 2000? Do I know what I'm doing? Absolutely not. One of the major key themes about this movie is family. I don't need turtles, I got family. Kaiju holds up a sign. How do we go to TMNT from Fast and the Furious? Fast 9. Turtle Racers. I don't need common sense, I got turtles. And Mikey's like, and you think I'm nuts? Pretty much most portrayals of Donnie has him as the voice of reason, and here is no different. He also likes to have a finger that looks like a gun. 00 Donnie. Dead end, doom. Donnie Bond. Pizza. Pepperoni. No anchovies. Don. Like, right, it's like, Why do I secretly want this? Okay, that's actually not bad. Whoever's looking at the bloopers, I want a parody picture of 00 Donny. Pizza. Pepperoni, no mushroom. Make it so. With a cup of Earl Grey. Hot.